I'm sitting here with Miss Catalina Byrd. How you doing?
I'm good, D. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's get right to it. What made you run for mayor of Baltimore City?
I originally ran in 2011. Um, Having worked in politics and been around it for a while, I could kind of forecast the direction we were going in. Ultimately, uprising happened in 15. It wasn't a good time for me in 16 for my family for me to run again, but at some point you can do with so much work in trying to help repair relationships with police and community and being on different task force and commissions. You really ultimately just kind of got to be the person that writes the policy. So we prayed about it. My team came back together and thought that this was our moment.
Let's go to the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I'm from 21217.
Okay.
I grew up, my grandmother's house was in Sandtown. My parents lived in what I used to call White Lock, but they call Reservoir Hill now as they have upped our property values. So West Baltimore, still live there, still raising my kids there, still trying to be a part of the change that we want to see there.
What made you get into politics?
My parents are in politics. So my dad was running for mayor when I was a freshman at Poly in 95. He was the Republican candidate against Kurt Schmoke. My parents were both really involved in the Republican Party. So I went to multiple Republican national conventions, state conventions. And it really wasn't until my dad was running that I realized everybody didn't talk politics in their home. Like that it was a foreign concept and that I was sounding crazy excited about debates and town halls and things. But it's just always come second nature to me because I grew up around it.
So obviously you are a Republican yourself.
I am now.
Okay.
When I ran in 2011, I ran as an independent. And because we are a closed primary state, it required me to get a certain number of signatures to get on the ballot. We came 400 short of the 5,000 that we needed. So this time we thought switching to a party so that all I had to do was file and ensure that I'm on the ballot. I get to talk about my issues instead of the process to get on the ballot.
Right, right. So, of course, as you know, we have not had a Republican mayor since 67.
Teddy McKeldin. Yes.
Right, long before we were here. So he had two terms, and they were 20 years apart. In between that, he was the mayor. The governor of Maryland. What makes you think that it's time now for a conservative mayor?
So it's tricky because obviously Trump wasn't the president when I ran before
Right.
and grew up in the party. But at the very baseline of conservative values is fiscal accountability. So when we look at what's happening in our schools, the schools that don't have heat, the schools that don't have air conditioning, we look at the money that goes missing from North Avenue, overtime corruption in the police department. It's all coming down to a lack of fiscal accountability. And I think that's what the people want. People who pay taxes, that come here to go to school and move here and start their families here, want to know where their money's going. And they're not being given honest answers. And everything is still declining.
So you spoke about that part. What, as far as the transparency, what can be done to make things more transparent?
The reality is we don't teach civics, right? Unfortunately, and because we don't, even the transparent things don't seem transparent because people don't know what they're looking like. If you noticed earlier today, a poll came out about the surveillance plane. And in response to the 15 shootings this weekend, it seemed about 75% of the people polled were in favor of this surveillance plane. They don't actually know how it works. They hear the word surveillance and get triggered and assume that it's something that is going to be used against the community and not for the community. But transparency is going to have to come in some education. We're going to have to explain these things better. We have to be accessible. And, I've been on air in Baltimore radio and TV for 15 years. So as far as my transparency, I've pretty much been the same person all along. And I still talk to people. I'm not unapproachable. You don't have to go through my campaign to get to me or anything like that. And that's the type of mayor I would be, is still hands-on with people.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought it up. The surveillance plane. There are three planes that they are trying to bring. One plane can cover about a third of Baltimore. So they have these three planes, and a couple, John and Laura Arnold, are putting the grant up for this, about $2 million. They want to also pay for some extra officers and some extra oversight for these planes. What it seems to me like you don't think it's a good idea.
I don't. I know when we test piloted it for the 100 days that we had it a few years back, that ultimately the information that we were told as people who work closely with BPD and community were told that it really didn't see as much as they thought it could see. It didn't result in anything but possibly one arrest. It wasn't like ShotSpotter where it was able to zero in on where something was happening and allow you to take that recorder and backtrack and begin an investigation. So thus far, it's not showing that it's going to be effective. You also have to wonder, why do some people from Texas want to bring a plane here into
Strange,
St.
right?
Louis, right? And Baltimore's uprising happened right after Ferguson. There's a lot going on in different cities that are in consent decrees like we are, where lots of money is being thrown at technology in the name of oversight. But are they overseeing the people, or are they actually overseeing the police? And that's where the critics and the activists have concerns, reasonably so.
Yeah, reasonably so. So let's talk a little bit about this. In spring of 2019, the computer servers here in Baltimore were compromised by a ransomware attack called Robin Hood. Interesting name. And mainly because Baltimore's computer systems are outdated. We don't spend any money on cyber attack insurance. Some hackers came in and held things for ransom for $76K. If Catalina Byrd had been mayor, would you have paid the ransom?
Absolutely not. You don't negotiate with terrorists. But had I been the mayor, I would have. So in May of 2018, the IT director actually testified to the council that they had not updated their software in over 6 years.
True.
That we were going to be liable for lawsuits because of HIPAA violations. It wasn't just the mayor's office, it was the health department where people's personal information is stored also. We still don't know what the fallout of that is going to be. But had I been the mayor and watched what happened in Atlanta and in North Carolina, I would have been proactive in saying, let's see what we need to do to ensure our systems are safe before it's too late and you're on the back end. Crime, IT crime, so to speak. We keep hearing about it. You understand Russian collusion, but you don't understand getting hacked. My kids are always on me about not having enough protection on my computer. And they're 18 and 16 years old. This was something that was avoidable, that didn't have to cost us what it cost us. And the fact that it took 2 weeks for them to realize how to go back to a mandatory system. Like, how hard is it to remember to write with pen and paper? We're not that dependent on technology. And if we are, we haven't had this technology long enough that we should be, or that it even makes sense that it took 2 weeks to figure out how to bring certain functions back. It's just ridiculous.
Right. It was a lot. Here in the city, the squeegee kids have been the source of debate and concern. What are your thoughts on squeegee kids?
We've had squeegee kids since I was a kid.
Sure.
I don't think criminalizing entrepreneurial spirits is the way to go. I appreciated what former Mayor Pugh was trying to do with the squeegee corps and creating a space for those kids to have other skill sets imparted on them. They got financial literacy classes and things of that nature. But the reality is we need to create a system that doesn't require children to have to go and be squeegee kids or anything else to be able to make enough money to eat. We've got to deal with the poverty and the inequity in the city, or we're going to keep having the same conversations.
Right.
But over policing them or
It's not the way.
It's not the way. I interact with the squeegee kids often. I talk to them. I know which ones are supposed to be in school and which ones aren't. And they don't feel safe. I've also had many conversations with the police about seeing adults shaking down the kids. So, you hear one or two people saying they had a negative interaction. Most likely, they were negative first, right? If you're rude to a child, then they're ideally going to be rude back to you. That's any person.
Yeah.
If you don't address them with respect, they're not going to give you any. But for the most part, these kids just want to make an honest dollar. They'd rather do this than sell drugs, which is we are appreciative of as parents and members of community. And we just got to find better ways to support them.
Definitely. I agree with that. So we talked about the police a little bit earlier. I want to go back to that and talk about Commissioner Harrison. He's been in his job since springtime. What do you think about his crime plan and the job that he's done thus far?
So it's not every day that I typically agree with the FOP, but I agreed with the FOP that the crime plan was not a crime plan. It was some things that have previously been done under other administrations with new acronyms, as well as something that we couldn't pay for, right? There are a number of things by virtue of the consent decree that we are mandated to have to update inside of BPD as it relates to IT and technology and the way that our systems are integrated. And so some of the things that were in the crime plan, there's just no money for. And so, I don't think that it was necessary per se for the FOP to kind of create their own crime plan because they are in fact a union and not a law enforcement entity. But I understand how they got to that conclusion given what we were given and said that it was the plan. It really just goes back to, things that we previously lived through in the 90s, jump out boys and things of that nature,
Right.
categorizing certain neighborhoods as hot zones. We lived through that. We saw the impact that had on us as kids growing up and the kids that came after us because of the absent parents and the broken homes and the broken communities as a result of which. And what we don't want to do is create another opportunity for a duplicate of a gun trace task force to come back and be able to over-police citizens that look like me and you.
Yeah, so that's true. And as far as the commissioner, you would have to work closely with him. What about the job he's been doing?
There are things that I take issue with. I've worked with the last 7 commissioners because I didn't just start
Absolutely.
doing this. And so what I find is that when you have a change in leadership, it's always customary that they change the organizational structure. We are on our 4th police commissioner, 5th pick, 4th actual commissioner in less than 2 years. What it's done to the morale of the good cops that are there, what it's done to the morale of the people in community who had started building relationships with certain officers who have been since moved around, is having a devastating impact. And I'm hoping that he can see the importance of not having to undo everything to have a footprint or a signature under his administration.
It's true. Another concern of mine in the city is the school system, education. What are your thoughts on the current state of that?
So a lot of my friends are teachers, and one of the things that happened, I want to say about 15 years ago, is that we went to site-based budgets, which meant that principals got to determine how the money that they were allocated for their school got spent. And in theory, it sounded good that the principal would know what the school's needs were. But previously, in that industry, the trajectory to become a principal was your tenure as a teacher. So ultimately what we did was we gave budgets to people who had no budgeting experience without the technical support necessary. And it allowed for the mismanagement and the misuse of funds. And we're seeing it impacted in our children in humanities, art, those kinds of things, not being in the school, not being able to retain teachers. And when the people don't care about the children that they teach because of how little they make and how stressed the environment is, it has an impact on how well and effectively they educate.
Absolutely. It definitely does. Can this be corrected?
Yeah, I would put the budgeting back at North Avenue with a specific fiscal officer whose only job would be to account for that. One of my more unpopular positions is I'm in support of charter schools. We've talked for years about what isn't taught to black children in public schools, and here's an opportunity for us to have more control over the curriculum if we understood how this charter school model works and be able to teach our children what we believe they need to know. And I think that people need to take the partisanship out of it and just look at what the opportunity is. I've known you over 25 years. If me and you and Kenny could get together and build a school that we know can use STEM and technology to teach these different skill sets that have since made you all exceptional entrepreneurs, that's another way of educating. There's more than one way, and we've not been creative in the way that we engage our kids at all, or how we fund their education.
Definitely, and we're really seeing the result of that now. You are passionate about domestic violence legislation reform, increased access to treatment options for impacted families, and resources for ex-offenders. Can you speak a little bit about those causes?
I'm a domestic violence survivor. So I was an advocate because I had family members impacted by it. But once it actually became my story, um, it changed, and was really able to see how antiquated some of the laws are as it applies to domestic violence. The legislation that we've been for the last 5 years trying to get passed and still haven't done so is to include harassment and malicious destruction of property as a reason to get a protective order. As it stands, you have to physically get harmed to be able to get a protective order against your significant other or someone that you share a child with. And what the data shows us that oftentimes that's too late.
Definitely.
And trying to get away from them, are you putting yourself in more harm? And we just don't have the resources in place to give families and children and those impacted the resources that they need to get out of those situations in a safe space and rebuild their lives, because there's a whole set of PTSD that comes with being a survivor. There's some things that you never heal from and that you're going to constantly be in need of support for. I have a therapist. I'm not ashamed of it. I had to make sure that my kids, because they witnessed it, also went to therapy, and working with survivors and understanding there's different steps in this journey. And it's the same for people who are returning home. If we really want to reduce recidivism, we have to create more pathways to success when you come home and you've ideally paid your debt to society than to continue to have barriers such as, the ban the box pass, but there's still other ways that ex-offenders are being discriminated against in the workplace. And once they are violated, they go back, and it just becomes a cycle that you can't get out of.
Definitely. As far as partisanship, you would have to, as they say, reach across the aisle.
Yes.
and work with a lot of people who have a different letter behind their name. How difficult would that be for you?
It wouldn't, because Democrats have run the city since '67. So all of my involvement, with the exception of supporting Governor Hogan and working in Governor Ehrlich's administration, I've been working with Democrats. I supported my senator, Antonio Hayes, in the 40th district when he stepped up to run for senator from delegate. I've got good relationships on both sides of the line, as well as in the Green Party and Independents. And at the base of it all, people I work the best with and that have the most respect for me, regardless of my party affiliation, is we all really love Baltimore and want to see it be the best that it can be. It's not a stepping stone to some greater political career. I'm not trying to get a cable news contract or a book deal. I have real tangible, studied and thought out plans to help fix Baltimore that I want to bring to the people. And then I'm going to retire and have a restaurant and enjoy my kids.
Okay, was not expecting that. So another thing that I want to touch on and get your thoughts about is the Preakness and Pimlico Racetrack and all of the hoopla that's going on there. Should it stay? Should it go? What do you think about it?
I think that it should stay. I think that it's still in jeopardy of leaving. Just last week, they came out and made it sound like Jack was the savior of the Preakness, and then like the next day, the father of the person whose company it was is trying to get his own board to fire his own daughter because they feels like they gave too much away. What we know, and people like now Senator, former Delegate Joe Carter, and others have been saying for years, is there was a lot of money that came in through the Park Heights Master Plan that never made it to the people that it was supposed to improve their quality of life there. As a revenue creator, and my dad's a horse racing fan, and I grew up in Pimlico. For nostalgic sake, I would like to see the Preakness stay here, but at some point it has to also benefit the people of Park Heights, and not just the people on the other side of Northern Parkway and Upper Park Heights and in communities again that don't look like us. Park Heights shouldn't have looked like this for so long.
Yeah, it's got to be as bad as it's ever been right now.
Because nothing has changed in 25 years.
Right.
Some of those same buildings that are sitting there empty and blighted today were 20 years ago. And the impact, again, everybody's talking about trauma now. It's like a new keyword to the point that I don't like to use it, because we knew the impacts of visually being surrounded by blight and despair all the time on the human spirit long before there were trauma-informed care certifications and all of these new buzzwords that everybody are using. But we already knew. We knew, like, if you were from West Baltimore, people didn't even want to go to Park Heights. It was already determined. It was vicious and a different breed, even if you're from West Baltimore too, because what was the impact? What was happening around them? You told a whole community that they didn't matter, and they could see on the other side of Northern Parkway investment, infrastructure building, and things of that for some people who didn't look like them literally across the street. That's going to take a toll.
Yeah, yeah. So at the end of the day, you think what's going to happen? Is it going to stay here or is it going to leave?
I think we get it next year, but I don't know
That's
if we
it.
keep it
Yeah.
indefinitely.
Yeah. I always enjoy talking politics with you. How can people support your campaign and follow your movement?
So the website is Byrd, 4 Baltimore.com. You can do the request form to join our email list, find out about volunteer opportunities. Right now, all the focus is on the Democrats. There's about 16 or 17 of them running right now, so I won't know until after the primary who my actual opponent is.
Right.
So instead, we're asking people to host meet and greets and not necessarily fundraisers. If you can get the people in the room, don't lead with Republican, but let me lead with my platform. And we're changing people's minds. They hear Republican first, and they shut down. And then I have to explain that Trump was a Democrat way longer than he had ever
Absolutely.
been
That's
a
true.
Republican. And I grew up in this party, and family means something to me, and family values, and again, fiscal accountability. Nobody knows how to make a dollar stretch more than a single mom. So, I'm on Twitter and Facebook. I didn't create, it's one of the things I think we learned from 2011. You don't have conversion from your personal pages to your campaign when you try to create that. So we didn't make separate pages this time. It's just me on Twitter, on Facebook. All my pages are public, Instagram.
You're very active on there.
Yeah, I'm trying to rant less because it'll end up in a Sun quote as a mayoral candidate when I forgot that, because I'm used to always having something to say.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about music and other things.
Yes.
It's not just
Kanye
straight.
won't give me this gospel album, but the Wale is rocking. So I'm gonna just take what I can get right now.
What's the biggest misconception of you being a conservative from people that say probably a liberal or Democrat that they have?
With the rise of people like Candace Owens, I think that they think that I don't know my history, right? Or that I in some way can't be conservative and pro-black. Like I have some type of self-hatred that I'm working through with my politics,
I
which
think
is not
that
the case.
she could, if you wanted to pin that on her, I could see a case for people making that.
I can see a case for where the line was shorter and it was easier. I remember when I used to do Roland Martin's show before he lost it on TV One, I had some friends who were formerly Democrats who had gotten into that pundit space, becoming Republican and using conservative talking points, saying, Kat, you could get a Fox News show if you would just change. Like, that's not what I really am here to do on the air. Regardless of party affiliation, I want to give fair and adequate assessment and actual solutions and workable skills to people who are listening, who want to be the change in their community or know how to help. It wasn't about trying to get to a check or a show for me, and it's still not. But because of this Kanye, Candace Owens, kind of Kirsten Peterson, Ebony K. Williams, this new black conservative space that really isn't rooted in a conservative narrative. It's just them needing black people to talk.
Right.
Is one of my challenges right now that I didn't used to be.
Okay. All right. Well, I definitely wish you continued success. Thank you for taking some time to speak with me.
Thank you.
And we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
All right.